Haïtien, frère, m'son petit, moi, m'bal bot toute vérité à sous tambour pour nous voyer vidéo ça Haïti, et puis pour peuple haïtien faire traduire pour lui. Faites hier traduire pour lui. Frère Jean Colomb Morven, faire Foucault traduire, m'bal bot toute bagarre là. Toute vérité, toute fille mon yo, tout professeur parler de Guy Philippe, de coup d'état 2004 là, faut attendre ouvert pour attendre haïtien. Ma bon toute photo tout le monde yo bon bagay yo. Amy Goodman, démocratie nord qui parle bon toute causé avec professeur université parler à blanc parle de toute bagay. Ça blanc fort depuis qu'il a commencé fort mal qui j'en le volo pour tendre à oreilles. Pas de nier le peuple là. Il a ma bon tout net. Hein, tant qu'on on pourrait photo moun yo pourrait toute bagay vérité pour retirer blanc dans sein pour suspendre qui des blancs absoucer sang jusqu'à nos jours. Pour retirer blanc américain dans le pouvoir, faut mettre Miscadé pour nous faire pays à prophète là. Pas que moun d'abord Guy Philippe qui a mélangé Guy Philippe avec Miscadé le pape jambon. Ou pas qu'à mettre des salines avec un traite. Ou pas le traite là, ou pas le nommer non, ou pas le nommer non à peine. Ou faire oreilles pour tenter faire traduire pour passer en anglais lié. Et me déjà traduit pour. Mais tout problème, ennemi, c'est blanc, blanc français, blanc américain, qui doit toute l'argent, ça, il n'y a pas son entêté. Il n'y a pas son entêté, peuple, là, parce qu'il n'y a pas bon l'argent pour pas venir riche, j'en suppose riche. Tu bon dire, ben non, on ne peut pas ici. Mais ils suivent, ils m'aller comme pour me voir télévision, pour les gens. M'aller comme bar, et puis me voir télévision.
Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now! Co-host Juan Gonzalez in New Brunswick, New Jersey.
Hi, Amy. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.
Well, the ransom. That's the name of a major series of articles published by the New York Times detailing how Haiti became one of the poorest countries in the world while bankers in France and the United States made a fortune. The story dates back to the early 19th century. In 1804, the enslaved people of Haiti rose up, leading a rebellion against French colonial rule, founding the world's first black republic. Under military threat from France in 1825, Haiti agreed to pay reparations to France for lost so-called property, including enslaved people that French owners lost in the rebellion. France threatened to invade Haiti and reimpose slavery if Haiti did not agree to a staggering amount in reparations, 150 million francs, 30 times Haiti's annual revenue. Haiti began taking out loans from French banks, leading to an economic crisis that continues through to this day. The New York Times estimates Haiti paid the equivalent of what's now $560 million to France over the next 7 decades. The true economic cost to Haiti is estimated to be an astounding $115 billion. And that only tells a part of the story. In 1880, a French bank established Haiti's first national bank, essentially putting France in control of Haiti's treasury. That bank, Crédit Industriel et Commercial, used some of its massive profits to help finance the Eiffel Tower. The bank's current owner has just launched an investigation into its dealings with Haiti and its role in what's called the ecosystem of colonialism, that bank, CIC. The Times series also looks at the U.S. military occupation of Haiti that lasted from 1915 to 1934. A key backer of the U.S. occupation was the National City Bank of New York, the predecessor of Citibank. Former U.S. diplomat Patrick Gaspard, who now heads the Center for American Progress, has called on Citigroup to pay reparations to Haiti. Gaspard wrote on Twitter, "A silent scream has been in throats for decades about the role U.S. played in depleting Haiti. No one would listen. Finally, some truths," he said. Over the years, Haitian demands for reparations have been repeatedly shut down, sometimes with force. France's former ambassador to Haiti, Thierry Boucard, admitted to the New York Times that France and the United States effectively orchestrated the 2004 coup that ousted Haiti's first democratically elected president, Jean-Bertrand Aristide. Boucard said one benefit of the coup was that it ended Aristide's campaign demanding France pay financial reparations to Haiti. To talk more about Haiti and the devastating impact of colonialism in this massive series in the New York Times, we're joined by two guests. Weston Lee Alsanat is a Haitian-American professor at Fordham University, where he teaches courses on the Atlantic slave trade, the American abolition movement, and Afro-Caribbean history. Gerald Horne also joins us. He's professor of history and African American studies at the University of Houston, author of many books, including Confronting Black Jacobins, the U.S., the Haitian Revolution, and the Origins of the Dominican Republic. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Professor Alsanat, let's begin with you. So this series has come out in the New York Times to both criticism and praise. It's come out in both Creole and in English. That's a first for the New York Times. Can you explain the significance of what many are calling revelations, at least to the general public, but certainly people in Haiti have been alleging for centuries, not only alleging, but of course having proof of this?
Yes, thank you, Amy. Thank you for having me today. I'm glad to be here in conversation with you. So first, let me start by saying that a great acknowledgement to the many reporters and producers who put this very special issue together, and to have given it a front time exposure, it will mean a lot. Not really for Haitians per se, because the facts that are being revealed throughout the report are very well known, even to the most illiterate Haitian, and even to the youngest Haitian growing up. In fact, given the level of underdevelopment that is prevalent in Haiti today, one knows, at least the Haitian people knows, that this could have only been the legacy of an external force, rather of their own making. So I think the significance of the piece will be that it exposes the rest of the world to a knowledge that actually has existed for over 100 years and shares multiple partners, both in the private sector with regards to the financial industry, as well as the United States government, Germany, Great Britain, and most certainly and most influential France, having played a role in imposing the debt that in many ways will explain Haiti's poverty today. So I welcome the piece. I think it's great in terms of the many research that it brought together, both from academic literature that had already existed, as well as new revelations that are coming up. But in terms of calling it revelations, that would be a misnomer. I myself have written it very extensively on the subject. Many other fellow academics, historians have written about it. There have been movements over the decades to get the United States, France, and the other parties responsible for this to get them to some accountability. And I believe a large reason why this never got the fair sort of ear of listening that it should have gotten is because it's coming from Haitians, who many people view as sort of the Africans of the Western Hemisphere, but which is an identity that Haitians proudly wear proudly for reasons that reasonably make sense for it in terms of the freedom that they fought and established for all Black people.
Yeah, I'd like to bring in Professor Gerald Horne to the conversation, another historian who has covered the issue of colonialism, imperialism, and slavery throughout the Americas for decades. I, too, had the same feeling that a lot of this is only new to people who haven't paid attention to the history of the Western Hemisphere over the last several hundred years. I'm wondering your reaction to to the piece, because the Times really is delving into history much more than news. I think the most interesting aspect of it was the particular individuals in France and the institutions that directly benefited from the ransom that Haiti was forced to pay. But largely, this is history that is known by people who know any part of the history of Latin America and of the Western Hemisphere. So I'm wondering your reaction to the piece as a historian who studied this carefully.
Well, first of all, I would urge and encourage the New York Times to follow through with their point that they have uncovered new documents by putting these documents online so that other historians can take advantage of their excavations, and or secondly, placing them at the New York Times archive, which I believe has been cited at the New York Public Library. But I think that the story also is of significance and of moment for us in the United States, for we in the United States, because there has been this myth that has been created that the United States and the Haitian Revolution were twins, even though we know, as I begin my book on the Haitian Revolution, George Washington, the founding father of this country, was quite nervous about the eruption in Haiti in August 1791. And this was understandable because the Haitian Revolution, culminating in 1804, led to a general crisis of the entire slave system in the Americas that could only be resolved with its collapse. Therefore, the United States was probably second to France in being an antagonist of the Haitian people. From their point of view, this was a reaction to the fact that many of the slave revolts in the United States had Haitian fingerprints all over them. I'm speaking of Gabriel's revolt in Virginia in 1800, the revolt in Louisiana circa 1811, Denmark Vesey about a decade later in South Carolina. In fact, Vesey had sailed in and out of Haiti before that eruption in Charleston, South Carolina. And then, culminating this hostility to Haiti, there is substantial evidence to suggest that when the island that we refer to as Hispaniola, was split in 1844 with the secession from Haiti of what became the Dominican Republic, that this was an early success for U.S. covert operations. So this story in the New York Times is of significance for we in the United States. Hopefully, it will cause us to re-examine the history of this country and move away from the propaganda point that somehow the United States was an abolitionist republic when actually it was the foremost slaveholders republic.
And I'm wondering also if it wouldn't have been worthwhile for the New York Times to do another piece on its own coverage of Haiti over the past 100 years or so. I'm thinking back, for instance, during the first coup against President Aristide, when there were numerous articles in the New York Times about how Aristide was considered to be mentally unstable and erratic in his behavior, all of it fed to it by intelligence sources. And even the Times' coverage, perhaps, of the U.S. occupation, that long occupation in the early 20th century. The Times seems to be willing to go after France and the U.S., but really doesn't look at its own role in creating the narrative of Haiti as a dysfunctional country. I'm wondering what you think about that, Gerald.
Well, you're absolutely correct. Obviously, criticism should be accompanied by self-criticism, and there is much work to be done in that sphere by the New York Times. You mentioned the occupation 1915 to 1934. The New York Times did not necessarily stress and emphasize in their coverage the mass opposition to the U.S. occupation, particularly by Black Americans, particularly by a founder of the NAACP, speaking of W.E.B. Du Bois, who, as you know, his ancestral roots were in fact on the island, and he led a vigorous campaign against this murderous and bloodthirsty occupation that in some ways involved the reassertion of unpaid labor, the so-called corvée, as it was called euphemistically in Haiti. And the New York Times would do well to re-examine its own coverage, because hopefully that would improve today's coverage.
Well, I want to go back to 2004. Juan just referred to this. France's former ambassador to Haiti has admitted France and the United States effectively orchestrated the 2004 coup that overthrew Haitian President Jean-Bertrand Aristide, Haiti's first democratically elected president. The former French ambassador, Thierry Boucard, told the New York Times one benefit of the coup was that it ended Aristide's campaign demanding France pay reparations to Haiti. I want to turn to an interview we did with Kim Ives of Haiti Liberté. This was right after President Aristide was put on a plane and sent to the Central African Republic. This was what Kim Ives described.
This is a U.S.-French-led operation. In fact, didn't Aristide say he holds the French ambassador to Haiti as well responsible for his kidnapping and wants to bring charges?
Yes, the French were involved in all this pressure and, in fact, were in some ways leading the charge. This was a purely U.S.-French operation.
And of course, France, probably more than the United States, had more to lose from Aristide continuing in the presidency, since he was beginning to lay claim to reparations from France for the period of colonialism and slavery.
Well, this is precisely it. You had the restitution for $21.7 billion, which was on the table. And we saw a lot of rivalries were put aside to get Aristide out between the ruling groups in Haiti of the comprador bourgeoisie and the big landowners, who generally are constantly squabbling throughout Haitian history for power. They put aside their differences to get together, which we see with Andy Apped representing the bourgeoisie, and Guy Philippe and Jodel Chamblin, more the Macoute wing. And we saw the France and the U.S., who have also been sort of vying, put aside their differences. So you saw this unity come between rivals against Aristide, because he represented the people and because he was a representative of popular will in Haiti.
So just to be clear, this is mid-March 2004 that Kim Ives was speaking. Right after that, Democracy Now!, I flew to the Central African Republic on a small plane covering a group of African-American activists and politicians, including Randall Robinson of Trans-Africa, as well as Congressmember Maxine Waters, who went to the Central African Republic to retrieve the Aristides and then brought them back to the Western Hemisphere, as the U.S. government was saying, how dare you bring them to this hemisphere? To which Randall Robinson responded, whose hemisphere? They eventually brought them to Haiti, and the Aristides then went to exile in South Africa for years before they eventually went back to Haiti, where they are today. I'd like to get response, starting with Professor Horn and then Professor Alsenat, about the significance of these coups, whether we're talking about Aristide in the early 90s or again in 2004, the coups against them and what that meant for this country. I mean, no precedent again would demand reparations.
Well, the reparations question is obviously key. Keep in mind that what makes the United States unique is that the slave owners were expropriated. Their property and the bodies of enslaved Africans was taken without compensation. That helped to give rise to the terrorism of the Ku Klux Klan. In Haiti, as we've been discussing, the Haitians were obligated to pay back, believe it or not, the enslavers. And likewise, if you look at the British possessions, so-called Jamaica, Barbados, etc., you had London compensate the enslavers, and by some measures, that total was not paid off until just a few years ago. And so this question of reparations is quite key. And also quite key is the role of Haiti in helping to ignite this entire process of abolition, leading to capital loss, not least in the United States of America. The enslaving class and their descendants have a very long memory. They have not forgotten Haiti's role. That's why they continue to punish Haiti for having the temerity to rise up against slavery. And even today, they continue to punish Haiti because they see Haiti as a haven for low-wage labor. U.S. baseballs in the U.S. national pastime are largely manufactured by cheap labor in Haiti. So there is still much to sort out with regard to this entire controversy.
And Professor Alsanat, if you could also respond right through today to the U.S. diplomat Patrick Gaspard, who now runs Center for American Progress, demanding Citibank launch an investigation, and the whole issue of reparations, whether you could see it actually being real, given the devastation of Haiti.
Okay, thank you, Amy. I think I want to quickly go back to what was asked with regards to the New York Times. Let me remind our audience that it was in 2010, not just days after an earthquake had devastated the country and killed upwards of 200,000 and more people, that the New York Times provided a platform for one of its columnists, David Brooks, to say some of the most racist things that I've ever read in the New York Times about Haiti. So if we are going to also give the New York Times the credit for what is a phenomenal job about talking on this issue, they should also start by apologizing for what Mr. Brooks had said then, which, let me quote real quick. Haiti, like most of the world's poorest nations, suffers from a complex web of progress-resistant cultural influences. There is the influence of the voodoo religion, which spreads the message that life is capricious and planning futile. There are high levels of social mistrust. Responsibility is often not internalized. Child-rearing practices often involve neglect in the early years and harsh retribution when kids hit 9 or 10. We're all supposed to politely respect each other's cultures, but some cultures are more progress-resistant than others, and a horrible tragedy was just exacerbated by one of them. So I call on the New York Times to both acknowledge these statements of racist demagoguery on its pages from Mr. David Brooks. As anyone can judge for themselves, they can go back and look at the op-ed and its pseudo-intellectual anthropologizing of Haitians. So that's one. And with regards to Mr. Gaspard, I believe he actually served in the Obama administration. And most people should know that President Obama, being himself the first Black African-American president of the United States, actually never made an official visit to the first Black republic in the world, the very nation without which Mr. Obama would have not assumed the role of leading a society like the United States as he had. So I would like to know from Mr. Gaspard, why is that the administration never actually took the very official position that he is taking right now with regards to Haitian poverty and underdevelopment, and the explicit role that the United States, France, Canada, and Germany have played in all of that. And then lastly, I just want to respond to your question with regards to just the immensity of the debt and the destructive legacy it has had for Haiti. The tragedy of all of this is that even once this debt is paid, if it were to ever be paid, which I, like Professor Horn, I believe there are parties that are invested in never actually realizing that possibility. Even if that debt were to be paid, we are already talking about decades of gaps in development that were missed in the process because of where the money was going. Something like upwards to 80% of all Haitian expenditures up until the early part of the 20th century was going to financing the debt. And the fact that American firms from Wall Street in cahoots with the federal government in terms of the State Department, the Navy, and you have names like General Smedley Butler, who actually wrote about his role as a Marines in Haiti and how he secured the interests of the financial corporate groups, as well as working with the State Department to make sure that Haiti becomes a haven for capitalism, as he said. And also, we can even see FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt himself had been Secretary of the Navy upon the time that Haiti was invaded and becoming a protectorate, essentially, of the United States. And he, too, had professed to actually amending the Haitian Constitution to take out a very revolutionary constitutional clause that had banned white male from owning land in Haiti. Among the first constitutional clauses that the occupation targeted was that, and therefore opened the country up to internal meddling by the international powers. But lastly, I just want to also note the fact that with regards to what you had said about the Eiffel Tower, Credit Industrial, which is now a part of Credit Agricole, one of the largest banks in the world, I think among the 10th largest banks in the world, having funded the building of the Eiffel Tower, which is now this massive monument to French industrial progress. That it was happening at a moment in which the United States, France, Germany, and parts of Western Europe were developing rapidly from the capital that they were extracting from many of their former colonies or their current colonies. So imagine what would the history of development in Haiti be today if at the same time that the world is undergoing industrial transformations, the likes of which we see today in the form of the Eiffel Tower. What if that money that was taken from Haiti, financing French infrastructure, was financing Haitian infrastructure instead? The fact of the matter is there is no progress-resistant genes that somehow Haitians are born with. Perhaps someone like David Brooks was born with that, with some progress-resistant gene, as he is unable to fathom that Haitians can take care of themselves. But the truth goes to show where the receipts are in terms of why we know Haiti is in the position that it is today.
Well, I'd like to ask Gerald Horne, the bank aspect of this reporting, which to me is, I think, the most newsworthy, in that the Times actually was able to get a hold in French archives of financial arrangements that were made between banking interests in France and Haiti, as well as it's uncovering, or more deeply uncovering, the role of First National City Bank in the early 20th century in Haiti. So I think that this is some of the best stuff in this report. But it's almost like, hey, New York Times discovers imperialism. Isn't the role of Wall Street and European banks in controlling the economies, not just of Haiti, but of Honduras, of Nicaragua, of Cuba, of many of these countries in Latin America, part of the operational mode of American imperialism?
Most definitely. And I think that the series, laudable as it has been, could also have made a contribution if it had pointed out the close connections between France and the United States. That is to say, in the 20th century, they began to talk about the Citibank and Citicorp and how it was involved in the depredations inflicted upon Haiti. But I think that if you were to go back to the Haitian Revolutionary period, you would also find similar connections. After all, we know that what became the United States was involved in a revolt against London that would not have succeeded without the assistance of France. We know that there was substantial French migration to the States, and that Frenchmen were involved in similar depredations in Louisiana and slave owning, for example. We know that when Texas seceded from Mexico in 1836, that Texas's major diplomatic ally on the international front happened to be France. And we also know that when the United States Civil War erupted, 1861 to 1865, it was France that opportunistically chose that moment to try to seize and occupy Mexico. and then extend the lease on life of slavery in Texas and throughout the South by welcoming slave owners from Texas and from Dixie into French-occupied Mexico, and it took a mass revolt by the Mexican people to overturn that particular scheme. So there is much more digging and excavation that needs to be done, and I would like to reiterate my call for the New York Times to open the kimono and to disgorge these documents they say that they have uncovered in France so that other scholars and other researchers can examine same.
We haven't even talked about the Louisiana Purchase, but we can't in this show. However, I want to end on the crisis that Haitians confront today when they try to come into the United States. I think it was last September the U.S. Special Envoy to Haiti resigned in protest over the Biden administration's policies. In a letter, the longtime diplomat, U.S. Envoy to Haiti, Daniel Foote, wrote, "I will not be associated with the United States' inhumane, counterproductive decision to deport thousands of Haitian refugees." Foote also criticized the Biden administration for meddling in Haiti's political affairs, including its support for Ariel Henry as prime minister following the assassination of Haitian President Jovenel Moïse in July. Foote's resignation came just days after U.S. Border Patrol agents on horseback were filmed chasing, grabbing, and whipping Haitian asylum seekers who gathered in that makeshift camp in Del Rio, Texas. We only have a minute, Professor Al-Sanat, but the issue of Haitian refugees being deported by the thousands back to a devastated Haiti.
Oh, well, real quick, I think what you've just demonstrated is that Haiti stands as a singular metaphor for understanding the racial legacy of imperial powers like the United States and France. In fact, as the war in Ukraine is happening, the sheer magnitude of the difference in the treatment of certain refugees because of their European background relative to, say, Haitians, as you just showed in terms of what's happening at the border. That's a very revealing example of what Haiti not only means to the United States, but what it means to the world at large in terms of populations from formerly colonized geographies, as well as Black, brown, and indigenous people in this country who knows something about the treatment of racism at the hands of the U.S. government. So in many ways, Haiti should be looked at as a singular metaphor for explaining so many of these various mistreatments and levels of preference for different groups. And I think the more we learn about Haiti, the more we realize how our fate, and this is not an overstatement, our fate is actually directly connected to it if we are going to better understand what world we're living in with regards to how the powers that be intend to engineer the world towards imperialism.
Our fates intertwined, going right back to the U.S. not recognizing Haiti's independence for decades, fearing that a slave uprising would inspire enslaved people in the United States to rise up. Weston Lee Al-Sanat, thanks so much for being with us. Haitian American professor at Fordham University, where he teaches courses on the Atlantic slave trade, the American abolition movement, and Afro-Caribbean history. And thank you, Gerald Horne, professor of history and African American studies at the University of Houston, author of many books, including Confronting Black Jacobins, the U.S., the Haitian Revolution, and the Origins of the Dominican Republic.
Est-ce que vous comprenez, peuple haïtien? Ça trouve là, ça montre là. Montre toute figure, montre tout monde yo. Montre grosseur professeur ça haïtien. Mon intelligent pas prendre béton dans Foucault dans parole monde ça yo. Parce qu'il compte toute bagaille là. Yo dou c'est blanc, li dou que blanc pas jamais fin avant. N'a toujours agressé net, n'a toujours fin avant pour son cause race blanche là. Parce que descend yo bas, qu'on y a descendre plus bas et a continuer descendre plus bas. On-t-il ou même au sorti là dans le peuple là. Me fait nous tout bagaille, fait monde qui parle anglais, traduit pour lui parce que moi même traduit pour nous. So, si m'pa que m'fait l'autre monde traduit pour eux. Depuis les blancs ap craso, depuis les blancs ap pillé, tout mal qui fait les blancs américains, blancs français. Qu'on a c'est eux-mêmes qui connaissent, sauf avec connaissance prophète là, pour retirer dans trou avant que blanc fourre dans tout côté, les couvre-net, c'est chevaux qui paraissent, et puis après l'eau dans chevaux ap cassé, on entre net dans trou peuple. Non pas faire dans trou parce que papa m'pa frapper blanc ça fort en pile pour comprendre tout mal il fait, pas jamais été impuné. Si on connaît peuple là, soit travaille avec Muscadet avec ou soit mettre traite Guy Philippe là-dedans parce que il y a un appel à Guy Philippe là qui fait qui empêche Aristide de joindre l'argent. Mais l'argent en plus qu'on y a parce que quand plus le temps qui passe là, depuis Aristide là, il y a 30 ans qui passe là. Ouais, des 30 ans qui passent, on paquet de temps passé là et nous avons demandé l'argent style parce que l'argent là. Mais professeurs haïtiens disent que même si nous avons l'argent, but you know, damage que structure que nous subissons, structure, développement que blanc fait à l'argent, eh bien, Haïtien a besoin de développement ça. Parce que nous entrons dans un paquet de pauvreté, but you know, pour la patrie, pour le pays, pour les ancêtres, marchands unis. Dans nos rangs, prendre de traite, Guy Philippe, c'est traite, Haïtien, c'est traite. Nous ne pouvons pas marcher à toute traite, ça, qui trahit de Moïse Jean-Charles, de CPT à toutes ces traites. Jovenel, c'est traite. Jovenel, c'est traite de tout ça. Que tout président qui suit, pas jamais demander l'argent. Parce que c'est blanc météo. Ni Martin ni Jovenel, c'est traite. Parce que pas jamais demander l'argent vrai. Après 9 ans et demi que vous faites. Continuez sous Ariel, pas jamais demander l'argent. Continuez sous KPT, on seul là. On seul haïtien. On vieux héros, le gars le blanc, qui fait demande dans bot. À cause du mise du puits, et gars connu, il était retiré là. Pour pas venir parler, pour pas parler comme ça. Parce que gars connu pas jamais demandé à M. Dupuis. C'est tout le monde se traite que n'a dit la veille. J'ai bon dit la veille. Qui était un prophète là. Et petit film, et ces petits garçons, offrent me ma barre justice qu'on mérite peuple là. Occupé à faire port qu'on y a, occupé à faire pays, occupé à faire destino peuple là que blanc prend. Et forcé du force. Les forcés sont pays indépendants depuis 21 ans. Les dit les forcés. Tant de faire traduit pour blanc forcé payer le corps qu'on pas d'huile. Parce que pas de jamais payer ou même pour descendre ça. Non, esclave oui, non esclave. Il pas de jamais payer. Ce qu'on a qui paye pour payer. Parce qu'on fait une bataille pour te aller perdu. Après 21 ans, ils mettent tête ensemble, ils réfléchissent. Qui gens, ils parlent à pauvre net, pour craser net, comme peuple souverain. Se souverain tour back, retirer Guy Philippe, retirer médias. Bon, Muscadet, peuple haïtien, pour me venir fort riche, parce que nous avons besoin de l'argent. Même si que nous pas bien visiter tellement de petite, non. À grand aigle. Parce que nous n'avons pas un pays bel pour lever la donne. Puis on connaît que vous pas de tête graine, vous pas inférieur. Pour les gens qui parlent fort l'école, dans la technologie, papa. Et puis il y a des gens qui parlent faire sans péché là. Vous pas vieilli. Même j'aurais prophète l'arrêté là. Même j'aurais petit prophète l'arrêté là. Il a prêté 63 ans, pas vieilli. Il n'a pas enterré parce que je ne vais pas venir faire moi-même. Je suis vivant. Pour le monde de Satan des Blancs, tourner dans le monde de Dieu pour tout peuple sur la terre, ses amis, ses frères, ils n'ont pas des lots à cause de zillions de dollars que je parle porter dans le monde pour ne pas jamais raser pour Satan ça, papier ça, blanc fait, il y a l'argent. Parce que c'est capitaliste. Que mon Dieu, ben non, on ne peut pas y faire. God bless, peace and love. Dans le capitaliste, dans le communiste, dans la démocratie. Tout le monde libre sur la terre. Tout le monde safe. Pas de violence, pas de rien, parce que nous tous, c'est Jésus. Nous faisons sans péché. Et son seul influenceur, pas de vagabond, tant que Foucault, pas de vagabond, tant que Berthaud, pas de pièce vagabond, qui dit ceci, cela. Parce que c'est papa seulement qui a parlé avant. Même Jean, ouais, moi-même, Jésus, c'est l'Éternel la seulement qui a parlé avec nous. Parce que c'est ça l'Éternel a dit qui prend. Et par les hommes, pas les hommes qui a parlé à Jésus, ni moi-même. Et papa parle avec nous, parce que tout ça, homme dit, c'est dans l'intérêt pas dans l'intérêt peuple. Et nous-mêmes, Peuple là, c'est petit, non. C'est nous qui faisons bagaille pour peuple là. Mais peuple là pas accepté pour nous faire bagaille pour lui. Parce que le pitou, le monde qui a dit il fait Satan. Et de pour faire Satan, peuple là, c'est Satan qui va venir. Ou faire bon Dieu à prophète là, ou va venir bon Dieu, ou va venir délivrance, ou va venir l'argent. Ou va venir la vie éternelle. Petit ou va faire sans péché. Que mon Dieu bénisse, peuple haïtien. M'bon tout preuve. Ça, ballon un peu au peuple là. M'bon tout preuve, m'bon toute image pour montrer l'aime douce et blanc. C'est pas moi seulement qui dit ça. Mon qui à l'école, mon qui vraiment dans intérêt peuple. Yo montre habit blanc depuis 1825, il a commencé jusqu'à nos jours. Habit blanc là. C'est vous connaissez ça fait. Est-ce que vous avez un miscadin ou la Guy Philippe ou prend miscadin seulement? Pour mettre le président, râler Guy Philippe sorti parce que Guy Philippe son traite, montre son traite lié. Il vend drogue, nous pas qu'à dire à mon comme ça pour représenter une pièce côté haïtien. Râler mon ça sorti, râler tout le monde ça sorti. On fait Haïti avec des gens nouveaux pour une Haïti nouvelle. Nous charger à monde, nous charger à diaspora haïtien que parti Samuel a choisi au parti Muscadet pour venir sénateur. Nous pas qu'à américain pour venir sénateur, au député, au ministre. C'est pas possible, peuple. Madame ou cas américaine, ou bien si son fille, ma ou cas américain, mais ou même qui servi pays, qui prend hymne national là, ou pas cas américain ou canadien, on pas connaît au japonais, au chinois, au russian. C'est pour pur haïtien, pour qu'à servir pays, pour trahir pays avec le peuple qui connaît, soit américain, il est à l'SIA, ou FBI vient poser une question, ça qui passe à Haïti. Les gens sont obligés de venir parce que on ne peut pas révoquer la nationalité. Des fois, il faut comprendre, peuple là. Il faut me protéger un peu de salines qui débattent à blanc, couper tête blanc même, pour me battre nos libertés. Qui m'ont dit, mais non, peuple haïtien. Partagez vidéo avec tout Haïti. Même si on ne peut pas parler haïtien, on ne peut pas parler anglais, faire mon traduire pour vous. Pourtant, de ça, mon saoudi, mon cap défendre, non. Mon cap fort vient de l'argent tout. 125 milliards, 105 millions, blancs français, blancs américains. Qui m'ont dit, mais non, peuple haïtien. God bless, peace and love. Partagez de avec haïtien pour nous connaître. Les gens, les temps pour nous permettre de mettre sur pouvoir. Sans Guy Philippe. Pas quitter arabe. Arabe parle en prison. Parce que arabe tué 10 monde déjà. Innocent tué. Oui, arabe tué 10 monde déjà. C'est moi qui dis ça. Et ma pauvre. Et arabe dit, il faut nous tuer femmes, il faut nous tuer tout le monde. Mon comme ça, pas qu'à patriote, c'est pas mon qu'on soit besoin. Mon gars veut tuer faiblesse. Parce que c'est lâche. C'est même genre gang yo, arabien. Et toujours un poids facile. Mon qui va pas combattre avec elle. Facile pour tuer un petit monde en fille, pas vrai? Eh bien, c'est ça, arabe, te voulait faire parce que son lâche, il pas jamais descendre. Il pas jamais mettre Guy Philippe à Miscadin. Parce que Miscadin connaît qu'il n'est pas qu'à Guy Philippe, c'est là pour faire payer. Il n'est pas qu'à en traite. Il faut le droit. Pas une place pour Guy Philippe là. Guy Philippe trahit déjà. Et blanc foutu dans la prison. So, si nous présenté au monde pour payer, Guy Philippe pas la donne à mon qui a présenté le peuple là. C'est parce qu'il est bon pour les médias. Il a blagué gang sur nous encore. Et puis les médias n'ont pas un coup de physique quand même. Or, il y a une bataille pour poursuivre quand même. Parce qu'il connaît. Depuis ce Miscadin, il finit. Ni Valérie Saint-Louis, ni tout le monde fini. Parce que le pays nous bon, pas besoin de pays ça côté à shooter, côté à courir des pièces côté haïtien. Qu'on y a ces gens qui viennent travailler dans le pays. Et c'est ça m'a fait pour le pays côté me fait là. Qui m'ont dit, ben non, peuple haïtien, que nous comprenons, mais c'est moi qui aime, non. Pas un monde qui aime, tout c'est de l'argent. Je dirais pas de l'argent, ça me fait l'argent. La gauche de Dieu, moi j'étais 63 ans bavier, qu'on l'argent qui a acheté, bagaille ça au peuple là. L'argent c'est Satan, oui. Ça fait nous pas bon comme ça, parce que nous fait tout mal pour Satan. Mais même bah nous Satan, en pile, en poche, nous faut riche, pour obliger faire bagaille pour Satan ça. Parce qu'il pas rien, son vanité lié. Et c'est blanc qui mettait comme ça. So c'est blanc cause tout bagaille net, peuple là. Connaît, parce que moi-même connaît, et me fait mon joli. C'est blanc qui change destino. So prend destino bac là, mais de bon Miscadin m'a bon destino bac. Bon Miscadin comme président. Et puis nettoyer le pays à Miscadin pour. Et moi que génial. C'est moi plus fort dans le monde. Dans tout ça m'a fait parce que. Quand on monde blanc barreau. Quand on monde gérant par le barreau. Puis tout fait sans péché. il pas vieilli, pas gain la mort. Ce pas gain violence peuple là. Et violence ça me retire pour sécurité en bas. Et moi plus bon la sécurité. On parle de FBI. Ah, mon ça beaucoup connaît. Mon ange avec pour monter sa sécurité là. Qui mon dit ben non on peut pas ici. God bless peace and love. Parce que FBI là pas qu'à connaître les monde pas le tuer monde. J'ai rap connaît un jour. Et m'a pas étonné. Parce que me connais soit penser. Que mon dit ben non on peut pas ici parce que papa me connais soit penser. Faut pas qu'on plan le peuple là. Il y a un bon plan pour vous. Pas de violence ou besoin de faire, pas couper Bab, pas côté Arabe, pas côté Guy Philippe, côté Miscadin. Et Miscadin comprendre. Que gang yo fait nous mal à cause de blanc qui prend la main indigène. Mais yo fait nous mal. So y a payé pour lui. Et puis nous mettons côté nous pas dire la veille encore nous pas ouais. J'ai l'argent pour ça, j'ai un plan pour ça peuple là avec papa. Pas OK pour. Everything's going to be all right. Tout va bon, oui, pour faire ça, peuple haïtien. C'est pour nous partager vidéo ça pour tout haïtien tendel. Pour ne pas perdre du temps à Miscadin. Pas perdre du temps. Logon bagay pas perdre du temps avec Samuel pour venir au état-major. Après ça, on a fait 2 partis politiques pour le peuple là. Accepter. Dans 2 partis, dans Moussa ou accepter, nous retirer toute vacamonnette. Tout le monde tombe net et puis nous prenons 2 partis politiques héros. Et nous pas fini l'histoire d'Haïti belle, en grand monde. Que bon Dieu, nous, peuple haïtien, God bless, peace and love, partage vidéo. Tout haïtien, partage vidéo, ça a fait au traduire pour tenter. Ça blanc frère. Moun qui a parlé vérité avant, c'est pas Tiva qui a bombé tout Foucault, qui a menti. C'est pas vers les qui a caché toute nouvelle. Et le créole, oui, New York Times, c'est écrit en créole tout, cherchez loi venir. New York Times, cherchez article en créole, ou aller loi attendez, peuple. Que mon Dieu, ben non, peuple haïtien, God bless, peace and love. La guerre média pour nous faire pays. Le bouchita non média, quand nous Guy Philippe à gang, ou par la dedans, c'est gang à fort. Tout ça à fort là, c'est pour qu'à sortir, peuple là. Tant des prophètes là, m'dou ça. Pas jamais sortir pour yo, ou pour Guy Philippe. Parce qu'il y a casé pays, il y a bonne occupation. Sortir pour Miscadé, mettez-le en prison. Mettez tout en prison. Pour 10 ans, puis il a sorti. So, mettez Miscadé sous palais, ça mène la vie dans l'état-major, et puis n'a pas un bon DG pas non. Blanc perdu, Capété perdu, au état-major perdu, Pariso, allez Pariso, ou révoqué. M'a dit la voix après. Que bon Dieu, ben non, on peut pas ici, God bless peace and love. La prend toute police qui trahit yo, qui vend balle à zam, à gang, la prend toute net, parce que pas jamais fait partie de police PAM non. Pour avantage de balle police sur la terre. Parce que c'est avec eux que je travaille, parce que c'est ange moi et papa me dit. Et m'a gâté en pile. Et m'ai l'argent papa pour me gâter. Parce que je pas demander charité, peuple là. Je demande charité. Que bon Dieu bénisse, God bless, peace and love. Partagez vidéo dans tout Haïti pour nous épreuve, ma banon. C'est pas causé. L'en anglais vrai, but you know. L'en créole tout. Dans New York Times, oui. Et m'a cherché le pour nous. Que bon Dieu bénisse, God bless, peace and love.